Hello everyone, I'm the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we're going to be giving a January 2022, just kind of like my thoughts, as well as what the models are saying, and also what has history taught us that could maybe, point some signs as to what January 2022 could bring us in terms of weather. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get started. So, looking at where we are currently with the Nino 3-4 index, all right, this was as of like this morning or so. You can see ever since like November, it's pretty much remained pretty consistent. I would say since early November till now, it has dropped a little bit because if you were to connect the line between these two, you can see the line does trend downward, all right, from that point. Yeah, so since like early November, we have trended in a downward direction, but overall, we've remained pretty close between ever since October. We're between that negative 0.5 and -1, which is like that that weak to what we call weak to moderate or weakish La Nina. All right. Now, what I have actually, I don't know if I've ever shown these maps first before, but I basically have a climatological map. So I've taken all of the Januaries going back to the earliest is like 1950. So the earliest in this case, 1955, and basically taking all of the Januaries that had a similar ENSO pattern to what we have now. We're sitting at about negative 0.9. I've basically taken all the Januaries in the past that have had similar traits to what we're seeing with this January, all right, or what could be expected at least. So looking at the base, the climatological history here, you can see that January in these types of, negative 0.8, negative 0.9, or 1 degree La Ninas do tend to be, at least what history has taught us, actually drier, which actually I found this kind of a surprise because you're going to see kind of like, the models maybe not agree with this. Only, above average precip for Washington and Oregon, but really like the eastern third of the country overall drier, which, and may I add, it's only slightly to what this says. This is like only between a half a degree and a degree or so. Nothing significant. Maybe slightly drier in the southeast, but California and Arizona too, which I feel like is really interesting because this is a La Nina. Now remember, this is the 1991 to 2020 average. Of course, I know I've always been used to following the 1981 to 2010 averages, but of course, in 2031 we're going to get to 2001 to 2030 averages. So it's going to go like every 10 years. But looking at the temperatures, now this also surprised me because I thought it would be the other way around. Now remember, this isn't a forecast for the entire winter. This is just for the month of January. So that's why I'm thinking this could be a little bit more believable because this is just for 1 month out of the 3 winter months that we have. So just do keep that in mind. The temperatures, again, same years going back to 1955. When we have a similar La Nina to what we have now, you can expect some cooler temperatures. Basically, pretty much from New York, Cape Cod, all the way down to Texas and Florida, and back up to Washington. Maybe some slightly warmer air in the northern plains, which I'm sure they would love that because it's about to get very frigid and is very frigid right now in those areas. All right, so pretty much the Northwest in terms of regions, the Northwest, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, Southeast, South Central, all cooler. Typically, when we have this type of La Nina for January, and then northern plains typically warmer. Right now, again, that's just what history says. We're also going to be taking a look at some models. So starting off here with the CFS, right? Kind of going by week. Now, this is closing out December into the very beginning of January. And you can see the 500 millibar patterns. You got the lower pressure here, higher pressure here. You can see more of a ridging. The lines curve upward so slightly, while on the blue side, they curve downward slightly, right? And this is considered your troughing. This is considered your ridging. All right, blues and reds here. Now, let's actually go forward a little bit, all right, to the pretty much like the first to second week of January-ish, right? Because you can see the lines, they trend downward and then upward as they head through the east. So again, more east ridging, which is pretty much the opposite of what the climatological data say, because remember how it said, cooler temperatures, right? But they show more colder air in the north, right? If we look at the temperature graphic for that same time period, look at this. Look at the cold air the CFS has coming in over here, while the eastern part of the U.S. kind of ridges, which is really interesting. Right? If we look at, now this is the 12th to the 19th of January, and you can see a lot more of a drop here coming through the east. And now we have like sort of a south ridge where this is the kind of setup where, the northern half of the U.S. is in a trough and the southern half is in a ridge. All right, don't see a pattern like that very often, do we? All right, and what does that translate to? That translates to more cold air spilling through the northern plains, some into the northeast, while the south stays on the warmer side. All right, that's like the middle-ish part of January. All right, and then as we get towards the later part of the month, they start to moderate a bit more because that's what they do because when they get longer range. But still, colder air coming into the northern plains while the south central and southeast stays warm. Again, these are just some models ideas. We got more models left to go about what January could look like. Now, how about precip? That was the ridging, the troughing, and the temperatures. What about precip? All right. Well, closing out December into the first few days of January. And if you saw my major winter storm video from earlier today, I did show some of these maps in there, so you might recognize it. I'll definitely go watch the video if you haven't already. But they pretty much, all three models, the GEFS, the GEPS, and the CFS, kind of honed in on this Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, Mid-Atlantic region for where January could be a pretty wet zone in there. And again, that's also contradictory to what, the history was saying. But again, history doesn't always have to repeat itself. But the West Coast also looking on the wetter side. And that's completely the opposite because remember, the West and the East were the only two areas that were dry on the historical data. So the CFS is showing those same two areas historically wetter than average. So it's very interesting. All right, that's why I think January could be kind of a toss-up here. All right, January 5th through the 12th, we got the Northwest, Northern Plains, and the Northeast all in like a wetter pattern, which is similar to the typical La Nina winter map, where you have these two regions are the greatest departure above average for precipitation. And that continues 12th to the 19th, not as much above average, but still in the Northwest and in the Mid-Atlantic. That still does continue, and then through the end of the month even as well. All right, then maybe heading into the beginning of February, maybe things start to turn around, but this video is only for January. Now, moving on to the GEFS, which is like a sort of a GFS ensemble here, you can see how the lines really do dip down over the west, and they kind of really curve over the east. Now you might think, well, why do the lines look so much more significant with this versus the CFS? Because the CFS, the lines look so flat, and you really have to look closely to be able to tell, because the CFS is a blend of 48-ish forecasts, all right? 12 rods multiplied by 4 members. So that's why it looks a little bit flatter, because it's more of an average. It's going to kind of, spread itself out. While the GFS is pretty much just its own thing, right? Now, looking at this, you can see as we move forward in time, you can see how the lines do sort of, dip in that downward direction, right? In those bluer regions, and then they sort of curve upward. We see some ridging in those more orangish regions, right? It's kind of interesting because they formed sort of a high now again, this is a 5-day average. This is end of this month and the early next month. But they sort of form a weak high down there, which is to say maybe we see another sort of like maybe a subtropical jet coming through to keep the south, a little bit on the wetter side, which is again not what you would normally see for a La Nina winter. But again, this is only just for January, so it is very well possible, right? And you can see that troughing does continue through the beginning of the month. This is the 3rd to the 8th. More troughing, especially for the Northwest and the Northern Plains. But some of that, you can see those lines do go like this into the Northeast, which means troughing is still in the Northeast as well. All right, so if we look here, we go to around 240 or so right here. Yeah, you can see, the Northern Plains, the Ohio Valley regions here, sort of below average. Now the Northeast, like the coastal Northeast more so, on the warmer end, while the interior Northeast and Ohio Valley maybe a little bit cooler. All right, but the Eastern Seaboard still does look a bit warm, all right, according to this. Now, the precip, again, just like what the CFS was talking about, that same region in the Tennessee, Ohio valleys and Mid-Atlantic and even coastal Northeast, according to the GEFS model, we're talking, several inches of precipitation above average. You might think, okay, you see on the graph, you see 1.5 to 3.5 inches. You're like, that's not that much. But just remember that in the wintertime, now, again, this isn't going to be all snow. Some of that could be rain. But just remember that an inch of rain can translate anywhere between, 9 and 15 inches of snow. So, when you consider that, multiply those numbers by another 2 or 3, and that seems like a lot of snow, and it is. But of course, if January does end up being a little bit of a warmer month, this may not all be snow. This could be some above average snow and some above average rain as well. So you do have to think about that, because even if January does end up being warmer in the east, it's not going to, more likely than not, will not always be warm. There will be some colder spells. All right. So here we have actually the CFS. We did just look at that, didn't we? Yes, we did. So let's actually move on here. All right. So this is for the month actually. So this is for the month. I thought I was looking at the same graph again. So this is for the whole month of January 2022. The other CFS is kind of breaking it apart by week. This kind of sums up the month as a whole. And you can see overall troughing in the west and in northwest and the northern plains, while overall ridging in the mid-Atlantic and southeast, right? And you can see the lines actually do kind of slope down like this, so maybe flatter jet stream overall. On the temperature graph, you can see how that looks, right? Pretty much what they were showing the whole time. We got the colder, you can almost see like the wedge, how it's kind of getting forced down. And again, mid-Atlantic, south central, southeast, kind of like in that ridging pattern. So looks pretty much like what you would expect by looking at the other maps. But look at the precip. Again, you know, pretty far above average for that same zone in Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, mid-Atlantic, where you could be 2 to 4 plus inches of precip, not rain specifically, but precip in general above average. And also for the west. All right, now looking at, all right, this is kind of like on another sort of version here. And you can see the 500 millibar height anomalies. Again, you can see overall troughing in the west. You see, you know, storm after storm coming into the west, and then it sort of makes its way onto the east. But, you know, are they stronger when they get to the east? Are they weaker? They look very potent when they come into the west, right? You can see some of them even dipping pretty far south. And, of course, you got the troughing, you got the ridging there. So January is sending a lot of mixed signals between historical data and, you know, what the models are saying. It's showing a very, you know, it's showing a very flip-flop pattern, a lot of mixed signals here. But definitely still probably going to see some troughing in the west and some ridging in the east, and those patterns are probably going to flip-flop throughout the month. So definitely a month to watch for sure. Thank you guys so much for watching. I am The Weather Dude signing off. Till next time, I will catch you guys in the next video.